Now we want to go to the police reform push from within. Joining me now is Mimi Rocah, District Attorney of Westchester County, New York, and John Mueller, Police Commissioner of Yonkers, New York. Now, District Attorney Rocah, before I get to ask you about issues in your county, the trial of 3 officers accused of helping Derek Chauvin kill George Floyd will help determine whether the system is really capable of change. Yes, Mr. Chauvin's conviction was noteworthy, not to be reduced, but it has to be understood moving forward that facilitating misconduct will no longer be tolerated, even for those who don't actively participate. And that will take more than one verdict. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's right, Rev, and thanks for having us on. It's one of the things I think the commissioner actually is going to talk about, because I've talked a lot about it with him, which is this active bystander training for police officers. I mean, putting aside, as a sitting DA, it's hard for me to comment on other pending criminal cases. But I will say that obviously we want to train police officers to have the ability to safely intervene when they see something that's wrong. And it's something that I've talked very frankly with my partners in law enforcement here in Westchester, and I'm fortunate to have amazing law enforcement partners here, including Commissioner Mueller, who I can have very open, honest, frank conversations with and find that we agree on a lot more than we disagree on. But one of the things I talk about is, the need for, when we're pursuing in a DA's office any kind of criminal investigation, which are rare, but they need to happen. But when of a police officer, we want other good police officers to feel free to speak up and come in and give us information truthfully. And it's a similar mindset, and it's something I think we're going to work on, and I know the commissioner is working on from a training point of view.
And not only feel free to come forward, but obligated to come forward if they're observing something that is a crime, even by one of their partners. Commissioner Mueller, before I ask you about your own town, we learned today that an Alabama police officer was convicted of murder for the 2018 shooting of a man who called 911 to report his suicidal thoughts and had a gun to his own head. That officer is facing between 20 years and life in prison. Now, the police chief in his town of Huntsville said he did not believe the officer is a murderer, and that local law enforcement there were in the first stages of shock. How much are police forces around the country possibly beginning to understand that maybe things are changing?
I think, thank you for having me, Reverend, and thank you, Mimi Rocah, for having me. Things are changing a lot, and, in a lot of very positive, real ways. As the DA mentioned, Project Able, which is important to say, it's not just in these real serious use of force situations, but it's also utilized in the many more situations where there may be 2 officers engaging a member of the community, and one officer is not really feeling it, or the person isn't really feeling the officer. So the other officer can step in and talk to him. But I think a lot of good things are happening, Reverend. I think it's important for us to remember that there's 18,000 police departments in the United States. And I always like to use it, the example of an emergency room. There's one guy who has cardiac arrest. There's 5 doctors around him. There's another guy with a broken ankle. So we have to really dial in community by community exactly what the community is looking for, where our strengths are, and where our weaknesses are. That's key. The national conversation is great, but more importantly is like you say, all politics is local, all policing should be local.
Now, District Attorney Rocah, as Merrick Garland's Justice Department announces investigations into Minneapolis and Louisville, Kentucky police departments, you've certainly and recently called on the DOJ to investigate alleged abuses by the Mount Vernon Police Department, operating not too far from this studio in your jurisdiction of Westchester County, New York. And I know Mount Vernon well. Reverend W. Franklin Richardson and I work closely together, as you know. Can you tell us why you asked for this and what those abuses entail?
So first of all, I didn't do that lightly. You know, I understand it's something that should be done carefully and considered. And I did it because I want to help bring as many resources as possible to Mount Vernon. I want to help. I know that the current mayor and police commissioner are working on transforming and rebuilding the police department there and rebuilding the trust between the police department and the community. But I think it's really hard in certain cases, like in Mount Vernon at this point, to do that alone. And we were doing and continue to do the criminal investigations, many of which were referred to us by the police department and by the mayor in that city. And we are continuing that work. But a pattern and practice investigation by the Department of Justice is something completely separate. It doesn't look at individual liability of officers or individual criminal conduct. It looks at the overall department and over a long period of time. And what are the training and what are the practices? And it is the manual in accordance with, you know, good policing? And then is the manual being followed? And I think even I don't want to speak for them, but I do think that there have been instances already since I've been there just in 4 months where the Mount Vernon Police Department has realized, you know what, we do need to change this training. And that's something that's happening around the country. But in Mount Vernon, it needs to happen to a degree that it really seems to me they need help. And I hope that the Department of Justice and others have seconded my call for this. Congressman Bowman, Senator Schumer, State Senator Alessandra Biaggi, asking for DOJ to put what are limited resources into this community that I think really could benefit from it. It can only help the community. And, you know, when we talk about things like strip searches, body cavity searches, those are things that need to be done absolutely in such a delicate way. And there were too many signs of it not being done the right way. So I hope that will be part of their investigation.
Commissioner Mueller, let me go back quickly to you. We go from Mount Vernon and an example of departmental misconduct, according to the DA, to your department in neighboring Yonkers, New York, also in Westchester County, also under the DA's jurisdiction. The difference being that you've taken on the challenge of self-generated reform, which we certainly welcome here in Politics Nation. What do those reforms look like, Commissioner?
Well, the first thing is, from a crime standpoint, we're very big on precision policing, Reverend, which is it's the recognition that, number one, mass incarceration does not work, and it never has, and crime doesn't support that. That 95% of the people don't commit any crimes. So when you dial in and you focus on the 5% that are victimizing our community, and you can find it across of every crime category, gun violence, persistent offenders, it's the same 5% of people. So what does this do? It allows us to really dial into the people we need to keep our community safe. And because we're not kind of blanket carpet bombing enforcement, our enforcement footprint is small, but we're so dialed in and focused on those offenders that we're having real success. I think that's a win for the community, because what the community wants at the end of the day is they want to be safe and they want to feel secure in how we're policing.
Mimi Rocah and John Mueller, thank you both for coming on Politics Nation.